All right, everybody, so we're going to do a seminar on finesse fishing. And anybody who doesn't know what finesse fishing is, you're going to learn today, hopefully. But afterwards, I'll be over at a booth over around the 1300s, the mainstream tackle booth, and you'll be able to ask questions all day, all weekend. So if you have any other questions after this, we'll head over there afterwards. Can everyone hear me okay in the back, too? Is it projecting good? Everyone can hear me? Sweet. Well, I apologize that you can hear me unless you want to hear me.
The Basquatch Hunter.
So my name is Mike McKinstry. I'm the host of a show called The Basquatch Hunter on cable and YouTube and everywhere else that they'll let me post it. And I travel the country in kayaks, and I 99.9% of the time fish for bass, and most of those times I'm finesse fishing. And I'm going to show you guys why I do finesse fishing. A lot of times people look at finesse fishing as small bait, small fish. That's the first thing I hear from people all the time, is they want to use big baits because they catch big fish, which is true, but big baits can't catch small fish. So I like using small baits to catch everything. And I'm going to show you today why small baits catch fish. You'll see in the tank here, there's about 6 species in here at least, even a goldfish. The only fish that won't take this bait is the goldfish, but every single species will go after small finesse baits, mainly because of presentation. Now, one of the biggest things on finesse fishing is why it's called finesse fishing. So the first thing you think of is finesse. It's light, it's small, it's very methodical, it's very pinpointed to a specific spot, like a certain pile of structure or a certain pile of vegetation. That's when you finesse fish around it. The opposite of finesse fishing is power fishing. Does anybody here, raise of hands, know what power fishing is? You got 1, 2? All right. Power fishing is covering a lot of water. That's the easiest way to explain it. So crankbaits, shaky heads, anything that you cover, lipless crankbaits, you cover a lot of water with it, that's power fishing. Finesse fishing is the exact opposite. So what I do for finesse fishing is I find out where the fish are with power fishing. Once I find out where they are, then I switch to a finesse bait. So if I find out they're right here by this driftwood, I'll switch to a finesse bait like the one I have on here, and I'll finesse all around it. Finesse fishing is a lot more patient, a lot slower. Again, it's more methodical, so I have very specific techniques that I'm gonna show you guys that I use for finesse fishing. And I'm gonna go over my rig first here. So finesse fishing, lightweight, small tackle, okay? So this is my lightest rod I have, my lightest setup I have. It's 10-pound fluorocarbon line, no leaders, no braid, very light, invisible line, so I can feel everything, okay? The reel is the lightest reel I've ever held in my hands, ever in my life. It's 5.4 ounces, so I can feel everything through the reel too. Then the bait is a 2.75-inch small little bait that replicates everything. It replicates a leech, a dying minnow, a feeding minnow, the back end of a crawfish, literally everything that the fish will eat, the predator fish will eat. This can replicate based on the way I present it and the way I move it. So I'm going to show you guys why a sensitive rod is so important too. I'm going to have you do this here. So it's easy, trust me. So grab the tip of this rod. I want you to grab it with 2 fingers just like this, okay? You're not gonna break anything, I promise. So just pinch it as hard as you can. So if you notice, she's barely holding it, right? I'm pulling as hard as I can right now till my arm's shaking, okay? Can you feel how hard I'm pulling?
Yeah.
And it's not hard to hold, is it? So when I'm using a super lightweight sensitive rod like this, all the power transfers all through this part of the rod. So by the time it gets here, and I'm pulling as hard as I possibly can, she can't feel me pulling it that hard. So whenever a fish bites that, I can feel that sensitivity through the whole entire thing. Even when I set the hook, I can feel anything it hits on the way up. I'll feel vegetation, I'll feel a rock that it hits or wraps around. So using a super light sensitive rod is really important for the power part of it and for the fighting part of it. But also, if I touch this tip of the rod to her artery on the side of her neck, I can feel her pulse from the back of this rod. And that's a really important test I do with my sensitive rods, because that way, this little teeny bait right here, when it gets pecked at, when it gets a little teeny bite, I want to make sure I feel it. Because the biggest problem, has anybody here fished with a worm and a hook, right? It's the normal thing everyone does, right? The number one problem with a worm and a hook is that the fish swallow it a lot, right? They end up going right to their gut immediately because they inhale it so fast. These small baits are the same way. If you let it sit too long after you feel that first initial bite, they're gonna suck it in and then it's in their gut. Then you're either killing a fish, losing your bait, damaging the fish, or all above. So when you have a sensitive rod, you can feel those little teeny pecks and you'll know when to set the hook correctly. So you get the side of the mouth or the top of the mouth without having to have it internal inside of the fish. These fish in here, most of them, the aggressive ones, are gonna be the panfish. So they're gonna grab it right away and you'll see them try to inhale it. And you'll see why it's important to feel that first initial bite. Now there's no hook on here. I bent it up so that way they can't actually take the hook. Luckily, because they will take the hook right in their stomach before I can even react. but having that sensitive hook, or a sensitive rod, I mean, is incredibly important for that. Is there any questions about the rod setup before I go up top? Any questions? Yes. Why don't I use a leader?
Why don't you use tell me about the leader you use?
Okay, so my views on leaders, and I always say fishing is about 4% science and 96% opinions and luck. So the reason why I don't use leaders is not science-based, in my opinion. It's my opinion. I use straight fluorocarbon because the stretch and the memory and the movement of fluorocarbon is very unique compared to monoline, compared to braided line. If I use braided line to fluorocarbon, not only do I have a knot that could potentially fail, which I don't like risking that sometimes, but also the stretch in my leader is different from the stretch in the rest of my line. So I have a better response, a better reaction, just my own opinion, when I use straight fluorocarbon. Also, the sensitivity of fluorocarbon is perfect for finesse fishing for me. Where braid, I lose a lot of my sensitivity in it. There's zero stretch in braid, so it's immediate. My fluorocarbon gives me a little bit of a stretch, so I have a tiny little bit of a delay to set that hook too. So I use straight fluorocarbon on all my finesse rods. My moving baits, I'll use more braided lines. I still don't use leaders on them because of the failing aspect, but I use braided line on moving stuff for abrasion, and if it's moving, the fish don't see the line as much anyway. Again, opinion. I always tell people all the time, fishing companies sell to fishermen, not to fish. So most of fishing is opinion based. Nobody's ever asked a fish what they thought of a bait. They usually just see if it works. But in the 20s and beyond, we fished with pieces of wood that we whittled on the porch, or cork, or we've all caught fish on hot dogs and chicken nuggets and cheese and bread. So you don't have to have these $55 lures to catch fish, even though there's some advancement in science, of course. But it's all personal opinion. It really is. As long as you have a good presentation, as long as you know how to use whatever bait you're using, and you get good with it, make it a confidence bait, you can catch fish with everything. It works out well. Any questions?
What rod are you using as far as weight?
Most of my finesse rods, good question, thank you. Most of my finesse rods are about 7 foot to 7'2", so I can get a long cast. When you're using a super lightweight bait, this is a 1/8 ounce head, which is the heaviest head I use for finesse fishing. I usually use a 16th ounce most of the time. In the tank here, I use a 1/8, so it has more time to hit the bottom because these fish don't let it fall too fast. So I use a longer rod so I can cast these small baits. If you're using a 6'6", 6'8", you're losing your casting distance a lot with these small little baits. I also use a medium to a medium heavy, depends on if I'm fishing cover or not. So this is a medium fast. The fast is the speed of the tip, and then the medium is the thickness of the blank. If I use a extra heavy, anything like that, I'm losing all my sensitivity. That's what I use for my moving baits, or my topwater rods will be the extra heavies. The medium will allow me to feel everything through the rod. So I like using lightweight rods for finesse fishing, but I like length for castability. And I like spinning rods too. I don't use bait casters for finesse fishing. I like the eyelets on the bottom. So when the line pulls down, the only point of contact is the eyelets on the line, so I can feel everything. There's no interference with the base of the rod, where a bait caster is upside down like this, and I feel like you lose some of the sensitivity because it travels through the whole entire shaft of the rod instead of just the eyelets. So that's why I use spinning rods. Any other questions about the rods, or anybody want to see this before I go up top? Yes.
How much does that setup cost?
A lot. So this setup is, again, it's all opinions. You don't need, I promise you the fish don't care what you're using. We've all caught fish with a Mickey Mouse rod, and I still do tournaments as an adult with Barbie fishing poles all the time with my buddies. The fish don't care. This setup is about a $1,000 setup, but you don't need to use that. This one is just incredibly, ridiculously light, and the more expensive you go, usually you get those features where you get the lightness and the strength combined. It's all a game of trade-offs. Everything in fishing or any industry is trade-offs. If you want super light, you're gonna have to pay for it, or you lose strength. If you want super strong, you're gonna lose the weight unless you pay for it. If you pay a lot of money for it, you get both. So if you feel how light that is. I literally almost threw this setup. It's my first time using a setup yesterday. I almost threw it because it's super light. You wanna feel this too? Feel this. It's the lightest setup it's, usually this is the weight of one of my reels.
Definitely want to feel it.
So the reel right there, that's the brand new Abu Garcia. This one just came out, it's called a Xenon. It weighs 5.4 ounces. It's incredibly light. The rod is made by FX Custom Rods, and it's a titanium series. It's the lightest blank they have. It's a 60-ton Japanese Toray fabric, which I know means nothing to everybody else, but that is the lightest fabric they can use for a fishing rod and still have strength. It's the same stuff they use on like the $500 and up rods. This one's about $389 retail. Anybody else want to feel the weight of this while I pass it around? Isn't that incredible? It's like the weight of a normal reel. You guys want to check it out? See how light it is? So, and when it's that light, it's really cool because when you're out fishing, you don't realize it because you're passing time, but you throw about 500 to 1,000 casts before you even realize it. So when you have something super lightweight like this, it helps you with fatigue, it helps you with your wrist, your shoulders. It's amazing how the older I get, the more I feel my casting the next day. So I like light setups like this. Anybody else want to feel it? You can feel it afterwards too. We'll do a Q&A afterwards. Oh yeah, and anybody who has kids here, so you guys got to listen, I'm going to do a quiz just for kids after this. Actually, you know what? We'll open up to everybody. We'll do a quiz after this, 3 questions based on what I'm going to be talking about up there. And if you get it right, you get a prize. And one of them is a really cool prize. The other 2 are kind of cool. So I'll mix them up.
It's all free. It's all good.
Yeah, they're kind of cool. It's all free stuff, so yeah, it's cool. If it's free, it's cool, right? It could be a high five. It's still cool. All right, and I'll warn you guys too, I can't see in the tank that well because there's aerators on top, there's bubblers on top. So when a fish grabs it, I can't always see it, but I can feel it for the most part. But I'm gonna show you guys my 3 favorite retrieves and presentations that I use with this bait. Now the bait I'm using, which I'll hand this out later on so you guys can see it too, this is the Cash Out bait by Berkley. So it's 2.75 inches. It has a little leech tail you can see moving around right there. So when it falls down, it has a little natural movement. Then when it sits on the bottom, this little tail sticks up over small rocks, over small vegetation. It gives it that appearance of a bait fish, either feeding on the bottom, or it looks like a dying fish that's on the bottom struggling to swim, or it looks like a leech, it looks like a back of a crawfish sticking out, it looks like a worm. It gives an appearance literally of everything that all these predator fish are eating. And when I'm looking for fish, does anybody here use a fish finder? Electronics, right? A lot of people, right? So when I use fish finders, I don't look for the fish that I'm catching, I look for the bait fish that those fish are feeding on. So when I use baits like this, I'm trying to mimic whatever they're feeding on instead, okay? So hunting predator fish isn't about hunting predator fish, it's about hunting the bait fish that they're eating, because all you're doing is mimicking their food. That's what we're doing as fishermen. We're trying to mimic their food, mimic the movement, so that way they strike our bait instead of the real thing. So in this tank, there's rocks, there's some rock structure, there's some wood structure. So I'm trying to mimic whatever fish is around there, I'm trying to mimic with this bait. So the 3 retrieves that I use, I'm gonna try to show you all 3, but it's kind of hard because these fish don't let the bait sit on the bottom too long. The 3 retrieves that I use are called the arch retrieve, which is kind of like the McDonald's arches. They're a high point and they come down. There's the rainbow retrieve, which is a long arc. And then there's a skip retrieve, which is really low and shallow, which is the hardest one to show in this tank, but it's low and it skips on the bottom. So all 3 of those mimic different kinds of fish, right? Or different kinds of species that they're eating off of. So the first one I'm gonna show you is the easiest to show on here, which is gonna be the rainbow retrieve. It's the one I use 99% of the time for any finesse bait, not just for this style of bait, but any bait. And I let it hit the bottom, and then I pull it all the way up to the surface and let it fall back down as I pull it back towards me. So from the farthest casting point to the boat, I'll just do full big arches. And 99% of the time, the fish will grab this on the way down. They grab it as it's fluttering down. So I like having as much time as I can. Now, finesse fishing also is the most patient form of fishing. It's called fishing, not catching, and this is a very good example of that because you have to let the bait marinate, let it soak, let it sit as long as possible. A lot of times I'll let it sit for 4 or 5 seconds before I even move it. In this tank, they won't let me do that, but usually I let it sit, then I move it, let it sit again, then I move it. So in here, we'll throw it out. So when it hits the bottom, I'll lift it all the way up to the surface and let it fall back down. And you can see that the fish grab it on the way down, right? Before it hits the bottom. I pull it back up and let it fall back down. And as it goes down to the bottom, you'll see the fish start noticing it. That's where it's mimicking a dying fish. It's starting to flutter down. It's starting to flutter down to the bottom, and they're gonna try to grab it before it hits the bottom, before any other fish grab it. So predator fish will eat either out of necessity because they're hungry, they'll eat for competition for all the other fish around them, or they'll eat out of irritation just to attack something. So if I mimic a dying bait fish, they're gonna try to get there first. So they'll strike it every time while it's falling down or while it's sitting still while they think it's dead already. So you'll see again, as it falls down, it gets the most attention. Bring it back up, and you'll see the arc motion, the shape that I'm doing. And my line tangled up again. Here's a rookie mistake I'll tell you guys about too. When you spool line up, don't spool it in your car while you're driving so it just wraps around itself, because it does this, it tangles up really easily. Hey Dan, do you have a rod down here that's got a finesse bait on it I could use? A finesse bait? Or do you have an Ed rig rod? Oh wait, hold on. I might have got it out. There we go. So that's why I don't have a hook showing too, because that bass had this probably down in his stomach when I just pulled it back out. Let me grab a spare rod just in case it does it again. So when you spool up line normally, especially on a finesse rod, you want to make sure you have tension on it when you do it. That way it's not loose on there. Here, Dave. Thank you so much. I'll be gentle, I promise. All right, so that's my backup. So the other retrieve I'm going to show you the arc retrieve. So this one is going to go a lot higher and shorter. So I'm not going to pull it towards me as much as the rainbow retrieve. And this one, I'll see if the fish let me do it. This one you have to let sit and soak for a second. You pull straight up and right back down. I'm not reeling my slack in yet. I'm going to let it fall straight back down, back up, straight back down again. Now, when you find out where the fish are, if they're always on the bottom where you're fishing, if you notice all the fish are sitting on the bottom like they are here, let go, let go. There we go. If they're always sitting on the bottom, you can keep your retrieves a lot shallower too. So when I'm looking for the fish, if I don't know where they're at yet, if I'm still trying to figure out where they're at in the water column, whether on the bottom, the middle, or the upper, oh, let go of it. That's a big perch too, geez. If I don't know where they're at yet, I'll start with an arc retrieve first so I cover every part of the water column. So if you separate this tank into thirds, you have the lower part of the water column, the middle part, and the upper part. The top two retrieves I showed you, the rainbow retrieve and the arc retrieve, cover all three, right? They go from the bottom to the top and all the way back down. So no matter where the fish are sitting in that water column, it will hit them. In this tank, or a lot of times in the summertime, the fish will sit down lower. They'll be on the bottom, sitting there waiting. That's when I do the skip retrieve. And the skip retrieve is the exact opposite of the other two I was showing you. I let it hit the bottom first, and then once it hits the bottom, I'll skip it. And it's just little pops if the fish lets go of it. Hold on. So I let it hit the bottom, and then I skip it. I keep it really low in the water column. I usually never lift it over the bottom 3 feet of the water column when I'm doing a skip retrieve, because that's mimicking every single thing that they're eating. That's mimicking leeches, the crayfish that skip across the bottom, the bait fish that are wounded that something else tried to eat. It's mimicking all those things. So the skip retrieve is super effective if they're on the bottom. Now again, if you don't know where they're at, that's where you start with the arc retrieve or the rainbow retrieve so you can find out where they're at in the water column. And the last thing I'll show you, based on which bait you're using. So if you're using like a Ned rig or a bait that's like a stick bait with no tail on it, retrieving it straight across the water is gonna have no movement to it. If you're using a bait that's got a little tail on it like this or a ribbon tail, you can also retrieve these as a steady retrieve. If you move it right along the water column as a steady retrieve, that'll attract fish too. But again, you have to figure out how deep to do it based on where the fish are. So you can still do a steady retrieve with the finesse bait. And there's attachments you can add like the TRD spinner and stuff like that in the back of them. But you can make a finesse bait literally mimic every single thing in the water, whether you're retrieving it this way, a steady retrieve, or you're skipping it or doing a high arc or anything like that. If you have any questions on these retrieves too, I'll answer them when I get back down there. The last thing I'll show you too is you can jig finesse baits. And a lot of people overlook this. You can always drop a finesse bait straight down. And you can see that bass grabbed it immediately before it even hit the bottom. You can always drop a finesse bait straight down. If you're right over top of fish, and I kayak fish, so I'm a little more stealthy, so I can sit over top of a school of fish and just jig straight up and down. Man, these bass are hungry. And once it hits the bottom, if they let me hit the bottom, there we go. I can just pop it like this. That's all you gotta do with finesse baits. Little teeny movements, and then they grab it just like that. And did you guys notice in the bass right there, if you guys can see in the front at least, that bass grabbed it as it fell, even though it only fell 3 inches. That dying motion is what attracts most bass and most predator fish to the finesse baits. It's an easy target for them. So in finesse fishing, I always say you gotta be very patient, let it sit, let it wait, let it marinate. In Michigan, we have about 6 months of cold water, right? Like we don't really have like a long summer. We have 6 months of cold water. We have the winter, we have the fall and the spring. We have at least 6 months of colder water temps. So just like a reptile, if anyone's ever had a pet lizard, they have to sit on a heat rock to digest food, or a snake. Fish are the same way. When the water gets cold, their metabolism slows down so much. When it's hot, it speeds up. They eat a lot more. So in the cold water, which we have half the year, you have to use small baits so the fish see it as an easy target. They don't have to chase it. They don't have to work hard to get it. It looks small, looks easily digestible. So it's not going to take them a full day to digest it like a big fish would. So these small little baits are so productive in the cold water for that reason. If you guys notice for smallmouth here in Michigan, smallmouth bass love little tubes, right? They love the tubes because it's a small, easy, compact meal that usually isn't moving too fast. So they can eat it easily, they have time to digest it, and they can still attack other meals if they have to without being full. So cold water fishing is awesome for finesse baits too. So I'm gonna come down, I'll hand this around because I want you guys to see the bait that I'm using too. You can pass it around a little bit and see what it looks like. And then I'm gonna ask you guys 3 questions based off what I talked about. So don't leave yet. Oh, they can leave, but don't leave yet because we have 3 questions to answer too. Yep. Thank you. Yeah, that's what I get for loose spool on that one.
Good.
Thank you. All right. All right, so if anyone wants to see this, I'm gonna pass this around. Everyone can walk around with it, check it out. I'm gonna start right here, just pass it behind you. If anyone wants to see it, you can look at the bait. There's no hook on it, so you can't hurt yourself on it. But that bait is the Berkeley Cash Out bait again. I'm pretty sure that's like a shrimp color. I just grabbed a random one on my tackle box. Every color for finesse baits works, but you wanna mimic whatever you're trying to fish for, like I was telling you. So if you see perch, then you can use yellow, you can use orange, you can use perch colors. If you see bluegill, you can use green pumpkins, use your oranges again, use your bluegill colors. Other than that, finesse baits will catch fish either way. So you guys ready for some questions? Everyone paying attention? I see some people leaving because they're afraid they're gonna get called on, I'm assuming. So the first 2 gifts we're gonna give away here. These will be easy ones. You get some free decals. The only rule if you get a decal is, wherever you stick it on, you gotta take a picture of it and share it with me so I know where you posted it. I just like to see where people put them. I've seen some really creative spots for these stickers. Also the website for my YouTube channel, my TV show, everything's on the bottom right here so you guys can see that too. So the first question, we'll make it easy one. Easy, super easy. What was today's seminar based on? Firsthand. There you go, see, easy, we got a good start. That was a good one. Loosen up the crowd a little bit. All right, so out of all 3 retrieves that I showed you guys, okay, which one stays on the bottom? There you go. Okay, we'll do another one here. Which retrieve goes to the top of the water column the fastest? There's 2 that go to the top. Which one goes up the fastest and down the fastest? No, that's wrong. I would have given you another sticker. Anyone? Yes. Yes. All right, so now we got our one serious bonus question. And anybody who didn't get a sticker can grab one up here until they run out. So someone's gonna get a new fishing rod combo too. So these are called dock runners. These are my favorite finesse fishing to do with my nephews because it's a short rod. You don't need to cast far with it. You can jig off the end of a dock. So this will be the bonus prize. This will be a fun question too. So the first hand that goes up will win this one, okay? First hand. And the first one that I see, so I can't see everyone at once here. So let me stand back a little bit here. All right. So when I was talking about finesse fishing, I specifically said there was one thing, the most important part about finesse fishing, and there's 2 answers to this. The most important part of finesse fishing. Who can get it? That's a maybe, because that's true, but that's not what I said was the... Patience, yes, patience. True, sort of. There was one, I'm gonna see if I get it first, and if not, there's 2 runners up here. No, that's true. Man, you know what? Maybe we should do a different question because I think all these are right here. Patience is super important. I'm gonna do a different question, okay? So the answer to it, by the way, was the small bait. That was the first thing I said was the most important part of finesse fishing is small, the small presentation. But patience is also one of the most important things. Lightweight setup is very important. Literally everything was right. That was a terrible question, my fault. I take responsibility. Okay, so new question. Does anyone remember the name of the bait that I was using? Remember the name of the bait? No, that's a color. No, the color was shrimp. No, it's 2 words. Cash out, yes. You got a new rod combo. It was the Berkeley Cash Out. There you go. You know what's funny is I was gonna make sure he got one anyway, so, because he had the second right question. So either way, thanks for watching the seminar, guys. My rod's being passed around somewhere. Hopefully no one took off with it. Perfect, thank you. Thanks for being honest. If you would have ran, I wouldn't have caught you, so. If you have any more questions, by the way, I'll hang out here for a little bit. Then I'll be at the mainstream booth. I have all my kayaks on display over there. Then at 6 p.m., I'll be in the lake somewhere else in here doing a seminar on kayak fishing too. So thanks for coming out, guys. Appreciate you being here. All right, guys, thanks for watching the seminar. Hope you enjoy it. Check out more content on the YouTube channel at the Basquatch Hunter or on Instagram or Facebook. Thanks for coming to the seminar and for watching it. Talk to you guys soon.